They met on a beach that wasn't trying to impress anyone. No loud music, no crowded bars nearby, just sun, salt in the air, and the steady rhythm of waves. She came alone, needing distance from routine more than adventure. Early mornings, long swims, books left face down on a towel. He arrived a few days later with friends, louder energy at first, but something about the sea softened him quickly. By the third day, he started coming down to the shore early too, before the heat and noise. Their first interaction was almost nothing. A shared glance when a wave crashed harder than expected. A half smile. Later, a simple question about whether the water was colder that morning. Conversation didn't rush in. Trickled. They talked while standing ankle-deep in water, letting waves interrupt sentences. Names came later than usual. Stories too. Felt easier that way, no pressure to define anything yet. They started seeing each other naturally. Morning swims that turned into floating side by side, staring at the sky. Afternoons where they shared fruit and coffee, brushing sand off each other's hands without comment. Evenings walking along the shore as the sun dropped low, shadows long, voices quieter. The sea did most of the talking for them. It covered pauses, softened awkwardness, allowed closeness without forcing it. One night, the beach was almost empty. Wind picked up slightly, waves louder, moonlight stretching across the water. They sat close, knees touching, shoulders brushing. He admitted he usually avoided getting close while traveling, said it felt pointless, temporary. She said temporary didn't always mean meaningless. That honesty stayed between them, hanging in the salty air. When he kissed her, it was slow, careful, as if he was asking the sea for permission first. Days passed faster after that. Time felt different near the water, stretched and compressed at the same time. They didn't make promises. They didn't talk about what would happen after. They focused on now, skin warm from sun, hair always slightly damp, laughter easier than anywhere else. The sea held everything without judgment. On the last day, they swam farther than before, floating quietly, knowing goodbye was coming but not rushing it. When they finally walked back to shore, towels over shoulders, they exchanged a look that said more than words could. They didn't pretend this was forever. They also didn't pretend it was nothing. Later, long after they left the beach, both of them would remember the same thing. Not the exact words, not even the kiss, but the feeling of being seen without effort. Of connection arriving gently, carried in by the tide. Sometimes love doesn't knock. Sometimes it washes in quietly, leaves its mark, and retreats. Not to disappear, but to remind you what's possible when you let the sea make the first move. Leaving the beach felt heavier than either of them expected. The morning of departure was quiet, almost too calm, as if the sea knew something was ending and chose not to interfere. They packed slowly, walked down to the water one last time, letting waves reach their ankles like a small refusal to say goodbye. Neither of them spoke about distance or plans. They had already agreed, without words, not to force the moment into something it wasn't ready to be. Back in their separate lives, the memory stayed vivid. Not nostalgic in a painful way, but present, like a warm layer under the surface of everyday routine. Messages began casually. A photo of the sea from another place. A song that sounded like summer. A comment about missing salt in the air. Communication didn't demand anything. It mirrored what they had shared, honest, unhurried, optional. That made it last longer than either expected. Weeks turned into months. They learned how to exist in each other's lives without relying on proximity. Conversations deepened slowly. They spoke about fears that didn't surface on the beach, about patterns they were trying to break, about how that short time by the water had reminded them of a version of themselves they liked more. Seeing each other again wasn't easy to plan, but the desire stayed steady. Not urgent, just clear. When they finally met again, it wasn't by the sea. It was in a city, loud and unfamiliar, full of distractions. They worried briefly that the magic belonged only to the beach. Didn't. The connection felt different, grounded now, less dreamy but more real. They laughed at how strange it was to know someone deeply in one setting and relearn them in another. That adjustment didn't weaken what they had. It strengthened it. They returned to the sea together a year later, not to recreate anything, but to see what remained. Walking along the shore, older, calmer, more certain, they realized the sea hadn't created their connection. It had revealed it. What they built afterward came from choice, not atmosphere. The sea had made the first move. They made the rest.